Operation Africa, a fascinating story that continues to inspire us today. A podcast to celebrate our history, share the present, and walk together toward the future. Produced on the occasion of the 60th anniversary of the Gen movement, the new generations of the Focolare movement. Produced by the International Center. Chapter 2: When Love Goes Viral, with Paola Torelli, Roberto Mosca, and Diego Goller.
Welcome, I'm Laura Camila, Gen 2 from Colombia, here at the Gen Center. In the first episode, we went back to the origins of Operation Africa, listening to the voices of those who experienced it firsthand on site. Today, we widen our perspective to Europe. While Operation Africa was taking shape in Africa, in Europe, many young people, still teenagers, felt they were part of the same revolution launched by Chiara Lubich. Through their voices, we discovered that this was not a distant story, but a journey lived together, made up of concrete actions, unity, and shared responsibility. Today, we will hear the testimony of those who choose to say yes to this adventure, living as protagonists in a story greater than themselves. With us are Diego Goller, responsible for the Together for Europe project, and Paola and Roberto Mosca, a couple currently working at the International Center in the youth field. At the time, you were only 16, 18 years old. As a young Gen in Europe, what was it like to embrace Operation Africa in a social context still shaped by a colonial mentality? And above all, how did you manage, despite your young age, to feel like protagonists and do such great things for this revolution of love?
Thank you for the question. We felt like we had a principal role there because we wanted a new world, something beautiful, something that truly belonged to us. And we were very young, just as you said. I was 17 or 18 at that time, yes. In March 1969, Chiara wrote a very important article about how we should recognize and acknowledge the Bangwa as a people. Why? Because for the second generation, she saw new peoples as a mission and a goal. Immediately afterwards, in April 1969, there was a Congress of the Gen leaders here in Rome. And we voted and chose 2 Gen members, a Frenchman, Jean Gauche, and an Italian, Roberto Bertuzzi, who were assigned to go to Fontem to see the situation there. And the whole Congress immediately threw itself wholeheartedly into it. The entire Gen world of that time was working for this cause. I was at the Gen Center, and through the Gen magazine, which was our means of communication, Operation Africa spread like wildfire. All of us felt deeply involved in it. I should also say that the soul behind everything, the one who animated us, was Piero Pasolini, one of the first Focolarini. He was the one who gave an enormous impulse to it, and every Gen Congress was marked by Operation Africa.
The 60th anniversary logo reminds us of the motto Ut omnes unum sint, that all may be one. How did you manage to truly feel united with the Bangwa people while living thousands of kilometers away? What actions, attitudes, or choices help you live this unity concretely, transforming distance into communion?
All right. Chiara's words were decisive for us. Of course, we were living in the post-colonial period, but that was not really what mattered most to us. What mattered was understanding that the African continent, as Chiara said, should be the first to receive help because it deserved it. In other words, Europe had a great debt toward Africa. Concretely, there were European Gen who traveled to Africa, and over the years there was always someone going. Gen who were medical students, nurses, and even surveyors, or simply people who went over to help. It became almost a contest among them all to ensure a continuous relationship with Fontem. Then African Gen began to come to our congresses, and this was wonderful because they brought themselves, their songs, their dances, and even their needs. I think this made us truly become, together, a piece of a united world, right from the very beginning. It was also, naturally, an enormous richness for the Gen movement because so many initiatives showed an extraordinary vitality, and Operation Africa truly became a great blessing from God.
Serving others can take the form of simple, everyday, and modest acts in our interaction with others around us. But there are times when this service calls us to step outside our comfort zone, venture into the unknown, and devote our time to those living in a completely different reality, but allows us to embrace the challenges of the humanity and the entire world, no matter where we are.
Could you tell us what the Gen of that time in Europe did to support this experience?
Yes, I'll start from my personal experience in our area in northern Italy. We were really very young, and this experience of being able to work with all our strength to build what Fontem and the Bangwa people needed filled us with enthusiasm. Being able to become protagonists in this mission of justice toward the African continent, as Chiara had explained to us, for people on the other side of the world whom we did not even know, made us feel closer to them, almost as if they were part of our own home. I remember very clearly that in our city we were involved in many initiatives. For example, we collected paper, newspapers, and magazines from homes, things people no longer use, which at that time could be resold to wholesalers. Or we organized many car washes for friends and relatives to raise a little money for Operation Africa. We also went grape harvesting during the harvest season to help farmers and earn something there as well. Another even more challenging activity was going out into the streets, wearing signs on our front and back like sandwich men, collecting donations and explaining Operation Africa. But even stronger was the desire to go against the current and change a common mentality that spoke of inequality between black and white people. Often when meeting people before speaking about other activities or selling something, we would also talk about the story of the ideal. We shared the story of this great ideal that we had discovered, and this is how many people came to know the Focolare movement.
Yes, I would add that it was truly interesting how even with the very limited means we had at that time, we still managed to share these experiences and initiatives happening all over the world, even though we were just in a small part of Italy. We have to remember that mobile phones did not exist, and even making phone calls was quite expensive back then, so our parents did not allow us to do it very often. But we had, as Iride mentioned before, our Gen magazine, and through the news arriving from every part of the world, we could read about what so many other young people were doing in different countries, inventing every possible kind of initiative. Every month, as Iride also reminded us earlier, there was an update explaining where we stood with the fundraising, how much had been collected, divided by nations, and how much was still needed to reach the goals we ourselves had set. During this period, many music groups were also born, the famous Gen bands. At first, they may have started simply to animate masses and collect offerings afterward, but later they began putting on real performances where we not only contributed by raising funds, but also spoke about the ideal.
You spoke about the Gen Revolution. What did you mean by that?
These commitments enlightened and strengthened our lives so deeply that we called it the Gen Revolution. In other words, challenging the world through the gospel. We experienced the words of Jesus, "Give, and it will be given to you." And we believed profoundly in these words of Jesus.
Can you tell us more about the actions in the various countries?
Roberto spoke about the initiatives in our own areas. For example, through the Gen magazine, we read that in the UK, 2 newspapers from Liverpool came to know the Gen precisely during one of the initiatives for the Bangwa people. Some journalists not only agreed to interview them, but also wanted to contribute personally by going themselves to factories and shops to present Operation Africa, receiving donations and goods in return. And there were many other similar initiatives in many European countries, France, Austria, Germany, Spain, but also North America, Brazil, and the Philippines. The experience of the Gen in Portugal was especially interesting. They explained that at that time, their country was still under a dictatorship and was therefore isolated from the rest of the world. Portugal was still fully involved in the colonial war. In fact, there was hardly a family without close relatives who had gone to war there or were still in Africa as soldiers. So, working to help Africa truly meant going against the current, and many people, including their own friends, disapproved of what they were doing. But they already wrote that Operation Africa was for them an opportunity to restore justice by repaying the historical debt owed to the African people. It also made them feel like one body with all the Gen, even though they themselves often felt isolated. And it gave them that certainty of an invasion of love toward a united world. I would also like to add that even the children, the mini Gen, as they were called at the time, although they obviously did not take part in the concrete activities, were still involved because the whole movement lived Operation Africa together with us, young people, and supported it. I remember the children using drawings, songs, and illustrated experiences to share this worldwide experience with their little friends.
Listening to this story, one thing stands out: not age, not distance, not limitations, but the strength of young people who believed that unity was possible. In the next episode, we will enter the heart of this radical choice to live and set out, discovering that our true home is the world. We will hear the testimony of Margaret Cohen, who lived this experience, and see how a dream of unity can become a concrete reality, made of faces, sacrifices, and light.
C'è una piccola città in Africa, proprio in mezzo alla foresta, proprio così. Gli abitanti del villaggio, lo sai, fan di tutto per amare come Gesù.